Hi guys, I'm Chris,
And I'm Mike.
and welcome back to this week's No Limits, a Mitch Rapp podcast. What are you doing this week, Mike?
Man, I had a blast with you yesterday. Seeing the Furman family and the kids at your new house. It was just awesome. Like I say all the time, beautiful family. Love every time I get to see you guys. And thanks for cooking.
Yeah, it was really nice to have you guys over finally. Love hanging out with Rosie. I can't believe it's been since May. I thought, or June. Or anyways, it's been too long.
Right.
Well, I've seen you, but hanging out with your lovely wife, it's been too long. So yeah, it was nice.
Thanks for the chicken piccata.
A little chicken piccata and some risotto.
Risotto, yeah. Master chef over here. When's the food podcast going to start?
Oh, that's the real podcast I need to start. Something that I can just talk about without any prep work,
You mean you don't read books and have notes and
Oh no, I do. I do that too. So
I should have written a limerick about your dinner last night.
that would have been good. Instead, you got a better limerick. So
well, we've got one today because Chris, what are we finally getting to that we put off a couple of weeks here?
yes, it's about a month since the book came out when this episode will drop. So plenty of time for you guys to have read this book, digested, hopefully read it a couple times because we're going deep.
Right.
We're going deep. You thought we went deep with Kyle? We're going even deeper. We're covering it. Enemy at the Gates, Part 1, right now. Free flowing. Talk about the plot. Talk about some points. We can't just do like Kyle and jump right to the end. We'll have some sort of chronological order here. But yeah, I'm excited to talk about this book with you finally.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly think I read it 4 times now, getting ready for this pod. And of course, we wanted to talk the big points with Kyle. But there is a whole lot more going on in such a short book that we haven't even covered with Kyle 2 weeks ago, with Rod last week. Which, by the way, if there was a reason to delay talking this book, it was just because we had an incredible opportunity with an amazing guest, and we just wanted to bring that to you as soon as possible. So if you didn't yet listen to our talk with Rod Gregg, the gun guru, the advisor to Kyle on the Mitch Rapp series about all things weapons and tactics, awesome dude, had a great conversation last week, and that's just another reason we are coming a bit late to you with Enemy at the Gates breakdown.
Yeah, no, that was great chatting with him, and he seemed to have some funny insights into their relationship and how things break down. So I love that.
Right.
He really was hung up on that crossbow scene. That still cracks me up. But yeah.
And we did get to bring up the water cannon though, because Lethal Agent had the crossbow, but Enemy at the Gates had a water cannon. I feel like Kyle now just has to find some crazy tool for Scott Coleman to throw at us.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited to dig into not only that, but that entire scene you were talking about where it had this gravitas. Yeah, anyways, all right, so let's just dive right in.
Well, every time we review a book, I like to share my thoughts in the form of a limerick. And we already had a double limerick with Kyle a few weeks ago. But that's just not going to cut it for our Part 1 and Part 2 book review. So I've got one ready for you today, all about Enemy at the Gates. Let me know what you think. There once was a power couple called the Cooks, bringing to Washington more than just slick looks. A trillionaire to foil their plan. Nicholas Ward is just that man. But something tells me there's more in the Cook playbook. A Mitch Rapp book set in Uganda. A badass opening starring Mukisa Adanga. Chisholm and his research. Scott and crew up on a perch. A controversial ending. I'm actually quite fonda.
Quite fonda.
And I very much wanted to work in Wakanda. But it just didn't
work.
Trigger. It just didn't work.
Maybe in 70 years, all IPs will have merged together into one thing, and Mitch Rapp will be working with the Avengers. That was
Mitch Rapp he'd be pretty good with the Guardians. He would get along with what's his name, Star-Lord.
No, you'd punch Star-Lord right in the face.
Yeah, that was a little facetious.
He's like we should do this one day, like compare Mitch Rapp characters to
the MCU.
Yeah, he's kind of like Tony Stark.
Playboy though, I don't know.
But he's more of a badass, like Captain America.
Right?
He's Cap, but he's Cap who can curse, I guess.
Yeah, that's a good point. A rough around the edges Cap. Yeah, that'd be an interesting
Anyways,
one.
if someone has a better idea for this, please hit us up. We're missing on it. Maybe Blade.
Oh, okay.
Or
Dude,
Deadpool. Deadpool.
This has got to be a wrap on.
Yeah, no, we got to. Anyways, we're getting way off the rails, and it's only 5 minutes into this pod.
Speaking of wrap on wrap, though, quick shout out to our patrons. We love you guys. We cannot bring this podcast to the masses without you. So thank you for supporting us. And if you want to hear extra off the rails content like you just did for the last 5 minutes, we come out with a monthly and sometimes twice monthly bonus podcast all about Mitch Rapp and our random musings about anything, really. Mostly covers.
Pretty much.
We talk a lot about covers on the Rap on Rap series for our patrons.
Yeah, if you think we don't talk enough covers on the regular podcast, become a patron and you can listen all about it. Anyways, so you like to start off with the limerick. I gotta kick us off with the Goodreads.
Yes, you do.
This one has a pretty high Goodreads. I'm gonna guess that's a statistical anomaly because of the newness. I guess the same thing happened with Total Power, right. Where it was like 4.7 when we did when we plugged the number. Then it's since gone down a little bit. Sort of, they all settle in right around that 4.28 to 4.31. Anyways, this one's 4.55, 4.7 out of Amazon. It's getting very, very high ratings. Very high ratings. People seem to like it. Although Mitch and Rod seem to say that, there are people out there that have emailed Kyle, let him know that they don't love it.
They get the emails.
We're going to talk about that. I'd love to read some of those emails. Anyways, the Goodreads summaries goes like this. Mitch Rapp has worked for a number of presidents over his career, but Anthony Cook is unlike any he's encountered before. Cunning and autocratic, he feels no loyalty to America's institutions and is distrustful of the influence Rapp and the CIA director Irene Kennedy have in Washington. Meanwhile, when Kennedy discovers evidence of a mole scouring the agency's database for sensitive information on Nicholas Ward, the world's first trillionaire, she convinces Rapp to take a job protecting him. In doing so, he finds himself walking an impossible tightrope, keep the man alive, but also use him as bait to uncover a traitor who has seemingly unlimited access to government secrets. As the attack on Ward's become increasingly dire, Rapp and Kennedy are dragged into a world where the lines between government, multinational corporations, and the hyper-wealthy fade. An environment in which liberty, nationality, and loyalty are meaningless. Only the pursuit of power remains. So, I think we should just go ahead and start out. We got to talk about... do you want to do opening, or do you want to talk about the cooks?
I was going to say, that entire... It's like a trailer, right? Reading that in my mind is like a theatrical trailer, just dropping the mic, getting ready for this book. And there's nothing bigger than the cooks. I feel like we have to talk about them, right?
Yeah, I think let's just go dive. We can touch on the Chisholm stuff, and I want to get into that opening because it's really cool. And you even mentioned this to me as you were reading it, and I noticed it right away. Like these long chapters, we get super long chapters that is not normal. I feel like it's not normal for Kyle. I can't remember Vince doing it that often. Maybe the prologues were longer at times, but
not this long though.
No, this very long. Like I think like on listening to Audible, like the prologue itself was 30 minutes. Like that's a long chapter for a Mitch Rapp novel. We're not talking about George R.R. Martin where you got 45-minute chapters.
Yeah. And it's awesome action though. So we're going to get to the action, right? And that prologue was phenomenal. But you're so right that overshadowing not only this entire book, but almost everything about where the Mitch Rapp universe is headed is the cooks. Because like Kyle has said, Mitch and particularly Irene have worked for presidents that they've had a good relationship with, or that they've built up a good relationship with, even if they weren't on the good side in the very beginning of, well, either, right? When they saved, who was it, Hayes in the bunker at Transfer of Power. He was indebted to Mitch for the rest of his term. And then Alexander, when they solved the hit on his wife in the motorcade when she blew up. I mean, all the presidents so far have owed Mitch and Irene a debt of gratitude. And here, we're just totally shifting the landscape.
And who's the president in term limits? Is that Stevens?
And that was Stevens. Yep.
Okay, and he was the one who was like the only like sleazy one, right? We didn't really meet him that much. It was more so like the people he surrounded himself with that were...
Right, Stu Garrett and Mike
Arthur
Nance.
Higgins and yeah. Okay,
but
anyways.
Mitch never had to deal with it.
No,
right?
Mitch didn't deal with it, but Irene did.
Irene did when she was younger, but before she really had any power, she was still at that time being influenced way more by Stansfield as her mentor than what the president... Like, Stansfield could have insulated her from whatever the president's antics and bullshit were. So I feel like neither Irene nor Mitch really... Stevens wouldn't have influenced them in any way. They were never on the page together.
Right.
But this is just a major shift. Like, I think of, and we talked about this with Kyle, the first like era of Mitch is in the Vince Flynn days, his beginning, right? And then there's an entire, like the American Assassin kill shot up to Transfer Power with the Gap. But then most of his career is this world of Al-Qaeda and, the basic Middle Eastern terrorist, right? And Kyle even had to bring that into the modern age with ISIS, but it was still the same basic kind of enemy. This is like a third phase that is brand new and that America is dealing with in our world, and now Mitch is dealing with in the Mitch Rapp world of what happens when you can't trust the institutions of the presidency and of the American government itself.
I'd argue we've been in this third phase ever since Kyle sort of shifted the enemy away from some sort of Middle Eastern threat to like a Russian threat to like more better aligning us with what's, going on now. And I'm surprised that we haven't seen like a Chinese threat. I think we've mentioned that like on a previous pod, how, maybe that's to come. But yeah, I feel like we've gone through Russia. We then went to like a plague tied with Middle Eastern terrorists. Mm-hmm. And then we had the last book was essentially domestic terrorism with
Power Station.
Yeah, Power Station. And then now we're going completely where we have this person who doesn't care about the institutions. Has a wife who, it very, very much so is like House of Cards-esque, where you have this couple coming in, they don't care about anything. And to me, these little tiny things that Kyle sprinkles throughout. I think the first chapter we see Irene, or right after the prologue, we see Irene like going to the White House. And she notes all these changes that he's made to like decorating. Right. And she noticed, she says, like, the only thing he didn't change was the Resolute desk. And then when she goes back, like, I don't even think she doesn't go back, but it might be Nash halfway through the book. He notes the desk has now gone. So, like, he's slowly eroding away, little by little, these American institutions, these symbols of what America are in the White House. And they're just supposed to mimic, like, what he's doing to the world. He wants to slowly chip away at control. And I can see it, maybe not, we haven't seen it so far, but I think that's where Kyle is heading. Right.
Yeah, I love how you picked up on the changes to the White House and the Oval Office becoming more modern, chic or industrial looking. Like the curtains, that to me was one of the details. You think of these very warm curtains in the Oval and the Oval carpet, right? Or the rug in the center with the seal. And all that's gone, and now it's polished, almost like a steel, minimalist, modernist architecture. And what you're saying, and you're right to bring up Catherine Cook, the wife, because they're two peas of a pod, you know?
Right.
And here, listen to this. I've got a quote here on Mike Nash rather early on when he first meets up with Rapp to bring him to the White House because the Cooks want to meet.
They want to meet him.
They want to meet Rapp, and they really want to kind of assess him and know kind of, are you with us or against us kind of vibe. But here's what Nash is reading Rapp in on about the Cooks. Quote, "What I can tell you is that she's a full 50% of that team, to the point that it's a mistake to think of the president as one person. It's more like Anthony Cook is the right brain and Catherine the left. Irene doesn't like them. Did she tell you that? She thinks they come off as a little ambitious. This I can tell you. Anthony Cook feels like he's the first president of the new era. He understands the shifts in the geopolitical landscape, in technology, and in culture. And while he's informed by history, he tends not to look back too much. His eyes are locked on what's next. He still wants to knock 250 years of dust off the country and put us firmly back into a leadership position." So, I mean, you don't like them. You're set up not to. But at the same time, you get this sense that they're kind of rubbing off on him in a sense of, at least they're bringing us forward. At least they're going to put power back into the seat of the American government and show the world that we are keeping up with technology. I mean, look at how much we're criticized for. Our infrastructure is falling behind while, the Chinese are building all these high-speed railways, or our educational institutions are falling by the wayside as other countries' universities and medical systems are advancing and modernizing and industrializing. You kind of get the sense that Nash thinks the Cooks might be the people to push America forward.
Yeah, and there's multiple times where he brings up this idea that Kennedy doesn't like them. Mm-hmm. But he never comes out and says, I like them. He then just, immediately after he says that, there's that scene. There's another quote where I think he's like on the phone with Mitch. And then obviously at the very end, he in their car ride, I think he talks about the Cooks with Mitch again. And he says, like, Irene thinks they're, whatever, but I think that, I feel like every time we go through, like, there's 3 instances where we go there, he finds himself more and more in bed with them, and he's sort of justifying to himself why he's doing this. At the time when you read that quote, we don't yet know that he doesn't even know that he's working for them yet, right?
No, not at all.
But over time, he's sort of rationalizing with himself why he's drifting away from Irene and saddling up with the Cooks.
Yeah. No, you're right. And of course, Nash is the one explaining this to Rapp. I think what I just read is like it's very early on. Yeah, chapter 4. I mean, that's some foreshadowing there that Nash is going to be torn, knowing that Kennedy and his friends don't like the Cooks, but his job, right, is you serve at the pleasure of the president, and that he is looking for redeemable qualities in what the president and his wife are doing. But before we move on from the Cooks and what they're bringing to America, a couple of fast facts about them. Anthony Cook is 44, so we have a rather young president. Was the governor of California. That tells you something. He rose from the turmoil of Christine Barnett's alleged suicide at the end of Lethal Agent. I would imagine also the turmoil of Total Power.
Sure.
They needed a strong hand to fill that void. And so, and also he has broad shoulders, a narrow waist, and at 44, a head still full of hair. He's described as he looks like the man with all the answers. Very imposing frame. So Chris, with this description, who comes to mind when you were reading about Anthony Cook and Catherine Cook? Let's talk about the power couple. Washington loves power couples, right? Who were you picturing? Who were you visualizing? It could be an actor, actress, but it could just be anybody. Is there a politician that you kind of had in mind?
I don't try to place politicians in when I read. I try to keep them out of my mind when I'm reading something for pleasure.
The only reason I say this because I think of like a Mitt Romney, just in terms of looks.
Yeah, in terms of looks.
Not in terms of politics, but just this kind of. I guess he's kind of goofy. I don't know.
Yeah. So I was thinking like I guess a little bit, because obviously the whole California connection. Right. I was thinking a little bit of Gavin Newsom, but mixed with like what's the guy from? Oh my god, I just had his name. Rob Lowe. Like I think of like Rob Lowe. You know, this like very a younger, because I think Rob Lowe is like 60 or something right now, or in his late 50s.
Like West Wing Rob Lowe.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh, that's pretty good. A couple of actors' names I just threw out there. George Clooney.
Like younger,
of course. Kurt Russell or Anthony Hopkins, younger. They're a little more, I guess, maybe round. I would want one of them, but just a little taller, a little like less stocky, but a little more broad.
Right. But the way they describe him is that he's very attractive. That's like, at least that's what I got just right. So
so strike George Clooney and Kurt Russell. Then you're right.
Oh no, they don't
fit the bill.
That's really good. Kurt Russell's good, like young Kurt Russell, Dirty Dancing Kurt Russell.
What about Idris Elba?
Oh, there you go.
At his current age, or even 5-10 years ago,
like a Stringer Bell, like when he's in The Wire. Tom Hardy's too short.
Yeah. Matthew McConaughey's too suave, maybe.
Tom Hiddleston. He plays that mischievous. Very, but he's not. Like, this guy also has to be. You're describing broad shoulders, like big.
Yeah, exactly.
Ben Affleck.
True.
Ben Affleck has like can get. He got wide for Batman.
Or that movie where he was the basketball coach, but he was a drunk, and he get
the way back. Yeah.
Well, how about this? So maybe this is just. Maybe Anthony Cook is kind of generic in that sense.
Yeah, no, he is. I think that's
we just listed a ton of actors, and none of them really sticks out to me as like who he'd be. So what about Catherine Cook? What about the because they have the 16-year plan, so she is just as cunning, and you got to have somebody with just as much a presence. And she takes Mitch aside in this scene, and you could tell her questions are very leading, trying to get him to commit. Or trying to tease out how loyal he's going to be to them. So you need somebody who's got some edge.
Charlize?
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Or Robin Wright, but Robin Wright's older, so like you need someone younger. Because I think Robin Wright plays that character amazing on House of Cards.
What about Jennifer Aniston right now?
You watch the morning show?
That's what I'm thinking, because she kind of in the morning show is like this professional, kind of very hold your own.
You could have her co-host. What's her name?
Reese Witherspoon.
Reese Witherspoon. Well, she's kind of annoying.
Yeah, I don't know about that. Well, this character is supposed to be kind of.
No, but this character is like super smart and calculating and.
Jamie Lee Curtis. Younger.
Yeah. Oh, what's her name from Big Little Lies? Zoe Kravitz?
I don't know. All right, we're gonna have to hear from you guys, the listeners. Tweet at us, let us know. Someone cooks. Inevitably, every freaking couple of weeks, someone on the Mitch Rapp Facebook group does fan casting. I don't think I've seen anybody post about the cooks yet, so maybe we'll get on there and see what the masses say.
There you go. So we want to hear from you.
Hey, so Rapp's at the White House, getting introduced to them. He soon after, or actually at the meeting earlier before this, when Kennedy's meeting with Cook, we get another new character, Nicholas Ward. So while we're on the fan casting, bandwagon, anybody stand out to you in terms of looks for this world's first trillionaire persona?
So I don't think Kyle described what he looked like, right?
No, he really didn't.
Yeah,
there's not much description.
In my mind, I didn't think of him as... I thought of him as an attractive person. But you could go the opposite way and tag him as a Bezos or a... I'm pretty much saying that Bezos and Elon Musk aren't attractive people, but,
He's got to be an Elon Musk, right?
Yeah, but the way he, I don't know. I feel like he could be... George Clooney could be him.
Okay, the only description we get, I just found it, a little gray at the temples, and he has an everyman smile. Kind of disarming.
George Clooney could be Nicholas Ward easily.
Yeah. Dude, look at Ben Stiller right now. Have you seen him lately? I'm not kidding.
No, I haven't.
That's what I kind of think of.
That's what you picture, Ben Stiller? But he would be cracking jokes.
You know what? Maybe you're right about George Clooney. Maybe you're right. He's very charming, disarming, not overbearing.
Ben Stiller's too gray right now. But yeah, no, I think George Clooney is our Nicholas Ward. There we go.
I think you're right. Or Elon Musk. For some reason, I just think of Elon Musk. But yeah, he's a little more personable. He's got to be more.
Elon is so awkward.
He's so awkward,
and
exactly.
so is Bezos. They're both, and like
They're
Steve
goofy.
Jobs was awkward. You know, like this person is cool but is super intelligent.
Maybe like a Tim Cook then, in that regard.
Right. More of like a Tim Cook.
More like a Tim Cook. Tim Cook, George Clooney hybrid. There's your Nicholas Ward.
There you go.
But he knows Kennedy.
He does.
They meet each other in the Oval, and the president, I think, is kind of surprised that they seem chummy. And Kennedy said that she brought Ward in on some bioterror threats. So possibly around lethal agent, she was communicating with his people. And
imagine like the same time she's like coordinating that like mobile command center. Like he's got, you know, because obviously we find out later that another character we haven't mentioned, which is David Chisholm, which we don't have any like conclusion with him at the end, right? Anyways, but we find out that Chisholm's character was new. What is it, Serena Miller, like the scientist from Lethal Agent?
Sienna Miller.
Yeah, so that's Sienna Miller. There you go. So yeah, there was like this. I like this like fleshing out of the backstory of Nicholas Ward.
I could be wrong, but that final chase scene where they think the truck with the infected meat supply is going to get across the border, I think Kennedy is like on the comms calling in a bunch of favors with different people. She calls the Mexican government, the federales to help out.
Right.
I think there's a line where she even says like she was calling some other contacts that most people didn't know she used at the CIA. I think there might have been a seed that she was talking to some private industries like Nicholas Ward's people. Yeah. But in the end, she works with him pretty cordially. They both want the same thing, to help people, to protect the country, but more so Nicholas Ward wants to protect humanity. Irene obviously wants that, but America first. And so they have a healthy dose of respect and a working relationship with one another. You see that going anywhere?
I was going to ask you, how do you...
Ooh.
Yeah. Could be. Well, so I think like the long game here, right? Is,
right.
You know, just to throw it out there, I think we're going to see Mitch and Irene leave the CIA. I think that's so too. What's going to happen. I think this series needs some sort of a big change.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big enough change, you know. It happened in Brad Thor did this when he had Scott, 6 books in, leave the Secret Service. Because essentially he wasn't even doing stuff with the Secret Service anymore. He was, whatever. So it made sense. And now this makes sense I could be completely wrong, but it seems like that's where this is going. And the most likely thing, which I think someone even says it in this book, Irene will get an 8-figure job becoming his head of security.
Yep. That's when Anthony Cook asked Nash, what's the worst case scenario? And Cook's like, oh darn, what if she leaves to take a 7-figure job and works against us? And then Nash is like, no, she's going to take an 8-figure job and not just work against us. She's going to work for the only person who has the power to stand up to us, Nicholas Ward.
So I was going to ask you, what do you think about these two? Kyle's really pitting, these two against each other, right? He makes them direct sort of enemies in this novel where the Cooks even, essentially take out a hit on Ward, and pitting this ultra rich person who is, I guess, has these dreams and aspirations not only for the United States but for the world, and free healthcare and state of the art technologies and everything like that. This utopia versus the Cooks who are these autocratic pragmatists that are going to, take over and lead the United States into the future. Like, what do you think Kyle's trying to say about these two, things?
Good question. I think he's doing two things. One of them, I think, is just how he sees the world. He's mentioned multiple times this global ruling elite kind of class. And Nash even brings this up.
So they would both be part of that, no?
They would both be part of it, right? But there's a big difference, right? And this goes to my second point, which is I think he's trying to, one, say what would a rising global elite look like, whether it's part of the U.S. government or whether it's supranational and these people have powers outside of national boundaries. So I think he's just setting that up to say this is basically a possibility for the future, if not the near future, this rolling global elite. But the second thing I think he's doing with that, and perhaps is more important for these stories, is he's putting Mitch, Irene, Nash, Scott, Marcus, everybody in the middle of that and saying, what are you going to do? And I think that's the 3-book arc. This book is the intro of posing the question and putting the stakes out there. What are you going to do with your skills? Because Claudia, Irene, Mitch, Scott, they're highly skilled. What are you going to do in a world that the power structure shifts that way? But it's really interesting because Nash, in his monologue towards the end, does say, I want to be on the right side of this. And I want my kids to be on the right side of this because the world is going to be divided into haves and have-nots 10 times more extreme than what we have right now. I mean, I think of like Brazil and the favelas, right? Nash is talking about the majority of people. I think he even says like 90% of humans are going to struggle to survive. And another 5 to 10% of humans are going to sit behind their walls in their posh, comfy houses and apartments and lead this lavish lifestyle. And with that writing on the wall, Nash says, I want to be on the right side of that, and I want my kids to inherit the right side of that. Where Mitch and Irene, I think, want to struggle against it or want to get in with someone like Ward, who's part of that 5%. He's the 0.001%, right?
Sure.
The richest man ever.
0.0001%.
But they want to use that power not to further entrench this divide, but use that power, use that wealth to essentially end it. And like you said, utopia, or bring more equality. And so I think the more important thing Kyle Mills is doing here, not just writing and creating that world, but creating that world and putting, kind of the microcosm of Mitch and Irene in it and saying, what are you going to do next? And to me, that's the whole next book. And I love it.
Yeah.
It's philosophical, but it's also small, right? It's big and it's small.
It's heady. It's heady. And I like that.
And that comes to a head when Mitch is testing Ward.
Yes. I was just going to bring that up to you.
I'll let you bring it up, but Catherine Cook tests Mitch and says, are you for us or against us? And by us, she doesn't mean America. She doesn't even mean the office of the presidency. She's like saying, are you with us
and husband
personally? Yeah.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Mitch is testing Ward to see if that's what his MO is going to be. And instead, Ward is answering the questions right, like, no, I'm not going to kill innocent children. No, I'm not going to order a hit, even if it meets our objective on, these slaves in the camp in Africa. Like, Mitch is really testing Ward.
Do you think Mitch was testing him, but do you think Mitch actually believes that what he was suggesting should have been done? Because I think he does.
I think he's wondering himself, but more importantly, he's wondering, do I want to work for a man who's going to order me to easily wipe out this village, including the child soldiers and the teenage sex slaves? Or do I want to work for a man who's going to take that mission and let me do my job in a creative way to get the job done without having to make those sacrifices? Like, how easily is Ward going to say, green light it, use my technology, use my weaponry, use my guys, go wipe out these people, save David Chisholm? I think they're looking for a phone, right? Getting Alma's phone so they can find them all.
Right.
I don't think he cares about the answer so much as he cares about the thought process of the person in power.
Yeah, no, and it's, bringing in multiple times where he forces him to make like tough calls, and we see that he has a conscience, and
Right.
he doesn't just, even though he has the money to immediately, send in helicopters to, order Mitch and pay Scott Coleman to go in and just kill everybody in this village, but he doesn't want to do that. And
Right.
I guess he quote unquote passes Mitch's test because I think Mitch thinks higher of him after the series of meetings that he has in Africa with him, forces Mitch to do the hard, go in the hard way, which I don't know. I also think that Mitch kind of likes doing things the hard way.
Right.
I guess it gives him a thrill. It would be easy to do it a different way than the way he ends up doing it. So,
right.
I guess we should probably get back to this Chisholm character, who's like the what kicks everything off. Where in this great opening, where we have Wonder Boy, virologist, working for Nicholas Ward in Uganda because there's this apparently there's a group of people that have some mutations that help them like find this vaccine. Yeah, I asked Kyle about how he didn't. I don't think he really understood what, or I didn't. Not. I don't think he understood. I didn't get across my point that well enough. So there's a couple sentences very early on where he decides to bring up COVID, bring up coronaviruses, and I know he's talking about like within his, because he obviously had a book about coronaviruses 2 years ago, pre-pandemic. I just wanted to know how comfortable he was like doing that, because when I first read those two lines or heard them, I like cringed a little bit. I was
flinched.
like, oh no.
Yep.
I was like, oh no. I hope we don't go into this, because
we don't need a pandemic book.
No, what is this? What is this? And like, I just hearing the word coronavirus, even though I know it's not COVID-19, it just like,
Right.
I didn't want it in my novel. It's like when I watch fucking Law and Order SVU, and they put on masks, and then like they show a tracking shot where they're walking in, and they have a mask on, and then they just boom take it off, and then like they have the whole scene is without the mask. It's like just it doesn't. You don't need it.
Yeah.
I don't know. Right. I don't get it.
Dude, I'm tracking with you. I felt the same way when it was early on. We're in Africa with David Chisholm. Oh, I'm working on a vaccine to end coronaviruses. I'm like, no. But it quickly moved on.
It did. Thank God.
There was so much more to the story beyond that. But yeah, and then another one and I don't know what was up with this, when there's a sickness going around South Africa with Claudia and Anna and her friends.
Oh,
I
was like, no, please don't like have her get sick, like have her like.
Is he starting to say there's like another variant of some disease, and he's gonna bring that up later? It just, every time germs and illness and this vaccine came up, I kind of cringed a little bit. I'm not gonna disagree.
I was just like hyper like aware of it,
Right. But would it be right to not have that in a world that is dealing with it? Can you just completely avoid it? Like, I know the point of a lot of this genre is escapism. So, but I don't know. I could see why you'd want to at least address it and then move on, which is what he does.
I guess what he does have going for him is that he predated the pandemic by a year and had a book about a very similar virus, about YARS. So I see where he goes, but I could have seen him not trying to address it at all, or not even bringing it up, But anyways.
Well, hold on. Here's why I moved on so quickly and ended up loving this opening scene. Because even though they talked about Chisholm and his research and he's working on this vaccine, Mukisa fucking Adongo comes in. And this
great
dude
character. We get him for a chapter.
Absolute G. Only a chapter. Right. It's a shame. But he's one of those characters, and this is very Flynnian. I think Kyle pulled off a Flynnianism. He gets you to love a character, know exactly what that character represents and stands for. Then when you lose that character, it means so much. Very often, TV, books, you lose a character who only had one page, you don't care. But what Vince Flynn did was you lose a character that you've only had a couple of pages of, and it
makes you
means
care
something,
about it.
and it sticks with you.
Yeah.
And that happens with Mukisa.
Yes. And you can feel this tension that, you know, he's had with, you know, this other character who I thought Gideon Alma was kind of cool until the end, which was kind of, we're going to get into that. But once Rapp has him, like, he sort of just lays over like a dog. Like, I don't buy that at all.
Yeah, that's true.
But anyways, this Gideon Alma character is so feared and, you know, as a cult leader and has these essentially trained animals that he hops up on drugs in human beings and will do anything for him. Thinks he's like literally Christ reborn on the earth, right? He's like, he speaks for God. And you feel the tension that this Odongo has had with, you know, they're not, I don't know, friends, but, you know,
they were
village
college
mates,
buddies.
they're college buddies or village mates, whatever. Yeah. And, you know, just the plans that he had and how he set up Chisholm for success, yet he knew that he had to, in order to save Chisholm, he had to give over his life. I don't know, this whole chapter, the opening scene was just written really well and very compelling. Like, it was almost like you could just leave it as a short story.
Right.
You know, and then
right.
You don't know like what happens, and then boom, that's it. But I really enjoyed it.
You were totally right. This being a short story that might not even have anything to do with the Mitch Rapp universe, just a tale of, you know, this village. It would be phenomenal. And you're right, this foil of the two characters, because Odongo, to me, he's like this general. He wants to protect this hospital because he knows how important it is. I think he understands the global implications of David Chisholm's research. He knows he's working for Nicholas Ward. But Odongo doesn't really care about that so much as this hospital is helping the villagers. Yes, they're doing research. Yes, they're collecting data. But they're also bringing the supplies he knows his country needs to move forward. And so I feel like Mukisa Odongo represents so many leaders on the continent in many countries, not just Uganda, but many countries who, if the power structure gave them an opportunity at leadership, or the institutions allowed them to thrive in a powerful way in their countries, there could be major change, right, for a lot of African countries. But like it shows, a warlord who has drugs and weapons and child soldiers on his side can silence the Mukisa Odongos of the continent, can silence those powerful, trained, humanitarian generals willing to use their armies for good and protect this hospital. But those voices are all too often silenced, whether it's by outsiders, right, colonization and white domination.
Look what's happening to Rwanda right now.
Or internally, right, by the power structures and power vacuums. And so, speaking of Rwanda, Gideon Alma makes me think of this confluence of three figures, or three events. The Rwandan genocide, and how many innocents were lost in that, but also how the future of a country, or the future of an entire region, was lost in that. And then also Gideon Alma is like...
It reminds me of Idi Amin, but like...
Idi Amin, right. And a more modern one, Joseph Kony, the warlord who did terrorize this region of Africa. And remember the Save the Children Foundation, all that crazy stuff.
Right.
But there was that Joseph Kony, just one of these warlords. And then a third kind of angle is Jim Jones in Guyana, which I know is South America. But the way he started this cult, and the sacrament is like the Kool-Aid, you know, where drinking the Kool-Aid comes from, that mass suicide. He's getting all of his people to rely on this sacrament as a drug, which is really, what did he describe? What did he call it? I forget the actual name, but like an hallucinogenic that basically takes your mind out of your body. And
it's like speed and heroin, right? Like mixed together, like speed or cocaine mixed together. Yeah. And it's funny when Chisholm's lab can like synthetically make it like 10 times better than what they're getting. Yeah, no, there's some little nuggets sprinkled throughout that were funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, this Alma character, I don't know, do you want to just jump to like where do you want to go with this? Because so David Chisholm is the foil that, sets the plot in motion, right?
Right.
He's there. We have this Alma character. Alma comes, and we just think it's, they're like, oh, Alma, why is he coming? And like, obviously he got bored or whatever. We find out later that he was sent there through the Saudis.
Yeah.
And so did the cooks just sign off on it, or did I was sort of confused about that. Did they sign off on it, or did they tell the Saudis to have it done?
I don't know about this particular scene, but later on, the cooks get involved because they give the Saudis the intelligence on Nicholas Ward's compound. Right.
So but stage, for the original setup, is it just the Saudis working by themselves and Anthony Cook knows about it, or does he even know about it?
I get the sense that America and Anthony Cook may not be directly tied to what Gideon Alma is doing now, but they are choosing to take the side of the Saudis, who are saying, we know our oil is going to run out. Right? Why do the Saudis want this warlord to kill David Chisholm? They know their oil is going to run out, and the royal family bet heavily on pharmaceuticals. That was like their next generational game plan for staying in power and keeping their wealth in a post-oil dependent world. And David Chisholm and Nicholas Ward's research represented a threat to Big Pharma, right? How all of these medicines that Big Pharma has gotten filthy rich off of would no longer be needed because the vaccine would eliminate many, many diseases. And the rest of their research had the potential to upend the medical field. So now the Saudis' backup plan is foiled. So I feel like we know Catherine Cook is hedging with the Saudis. They're also adjusting their portfolio to say the same. And so they need Nicholas Ward and David Chisholm out of the picture, both personally, because that was Catherine Cook's, finances. They say, oh, if Nicholas Ward were to come back from the dead later on, they'd lose like $26 million overnight. And that was $26 million they got through betting that Nicholas Ward's empire would collapse and, the status quo would return. So I think at this point, it's not a direct connection to the Saudis sending Alma after Chisholm, but later on it will be when Alma fails, doesn't capture Chisholm or Ward, that they need additional intel, and that's when they turn to the Americans.
Right.
Which, in turn, which we're going to get to, is why Anthony Cook taps Nash to hack the CIA system.
Yeah, to be the mole. So do you think that leading up to, the whole backstory with the Cooks and their money and being in bed with, they essentially, everything that Ward stands against, they are betting, against him. Do you think that was well drawn out, explained? To me, it felt a little bit rushed.
I think it might be my biggest criticism of the book, but it's rationalized or justified by knowing Kyle had to cut the 10 chapters.
Yeah, I guess, when are we going to talk about that? Should we just talk about it now, get it out of the way?
Yeah, because he did say part of those 10 chapters were backstory.
Sure.
Particularly backstory on the Cooks and Ward's relationship. Something about one of the Cooks' children. So I think all that backstory being removed, and I think the Cooks' game plan was also to bring down the American democracy and set up an empire, almost like Putin has in Russia, where he could stay in power forever, or his family can, right? And so I think the Cook's son was going to play a role in that. And the son having a relationship with Ward was going to play a role. So I think Ward was a threat on multiple levels, not just financially. And when all that got cut and the subversion of American democracy got cut, I think you had to have another reason the Cooks would want to take down Ward. And so finances were just the easy, it was the low-hanging fruit.
Right.
That's how I feel.
What do you think? You can just speculate for. We'll spend a minute on this because we'll never know. But what do you think the inciting incidence was to cut those 10 chapters?
I get the sense that the Cooks had a cult of personality, and they use that either a direct insurrection, or they use that to manipulate an election. Like, I think there is a 1-to-1 to either January 6th or a contested election.
Yeah, I almost feel like we didn't. The prologue wasn't the original prologue. Like the book started with the election. You know, essentially picked up with not the last book, but the beginning, the end of Lethal Agent, almost. Where, well, I guess you had to, but you know, just more mimicking right after Christine Barnett's death, and then this rise of this family. Obviously past total power, but you know how they get to the I think we see. I at least in my mind, I think we see more of that. But anyways, we'll move on quickly because we'll never know. But
I think
that's
you're right.
Just my conjecture.
Yeah, I think you're right. What if we just kind of wrap up part 1 here with the rest of the Africa action? Because the book does open with quite a bit of action in the first third, where David Chisholm escapes the hospital thanks to Adongo's sacrifice. Adongo actually knows he'd be tortured and spill secrets that David Chisholm was in this holding cell underneath, or this hiding place. And so he rushes Gideon Alma with a knife, knowing when he rushes Gideon Alma, his guards are going to automatically kill him, shoot him. So Mukisa Adongo's dead, which gives Chisholm time to escape out the rear of the hospital. They have to run through a fire, 2 of his assistants. And so it's him, one of his staff who is healthy, this Chinese lady who's actually really good, and her survival instincts kick in, growing up on hardship in the farms of China, how to survive in the jungle. But then there's another Italian, Matteo Ricci, who got burned and his leg is infected. So they're hiding in a cave. They're barely holding on. And they know Alma's troops are out there searching for them. And they're trying to tease them out. They're calling their name all night long. They know they have to shelter in place. And this is basically when Cook wants to make sure he's dead. And Cook wants to use this as an opportunity to show his good faith towards Ward.
Right.
So that Ward doesn't completely turn on him. Because the world's first trillionaire, very influential guy. If he's against you politically, it's going to be a tough election. And so he wants to get on Ward's good side by sending a rescue squad, but he doesn't actually want them to be successful saving Chisholm, because then his investments go down the tubes.
This was kind of interesting. He sends, you know, because we only find out, we get this like brief interlude of one of the leaders there, and he's like, why am I even here? Is it because I voted for the man? Like, my direct commander doesn't even know, like, I'm here. Like, it's just like 12 random people. And he even says, like, we're going to walk around the woods for 3 days and that's it. And like, you know, we're going to, my mission parameter is not to save David Chisholm, but it's to get my men out of here alive.
Yep.
But it was funny because I think later on, Mitch hears about these Americans that are in the forest, in the jungle, because Mitch goes over there because Ward comes to him and Ward comes to Irene and asks him to go over there. Cook doesn't want, that's the one thing he doesn't want, is he doesn't want our best asset going over there and finding Chisholm, because again, he wants Chisholm dead. Mitch goes over there and then he starts asking around because he comes up with this plan because he doesn't want to interfere with them. So he calls like Africa Command, and Africa Command's like, I have no idea who's there. Like, you would think, he's like, are they Delta? Like, he thinks, you know, it's just a bunch of ragtag soldiers. Like, it's so obvious that he didn't want them to be caught. Like, it's just, why you could have done a better job hiding that, I felt like.
It's so interesting. And I remember now, Cook goes a step further and says, I can prove that I actually was committed to this mission if we lose American soldiers. He actually wants these guys to die over there, because in the public eye, or in Nicholas Ward's perspective, it'd be like, wow, Cook really made a sacrifice. You know, he actually was willing to put American troops out there to try to recover David Chisholm. And And in Cook's warped mind, it was a show of good faith that Americans died searching for his man. And he thought that would endear Nicholas Ward to him even more. Really twisted. He like literally sacrificed American soldiers.
Yeah. Very twisted.
But that dude, I forget his name, such a minor character. But when you're on the ground with him in Africa, you kind of really come to like him. Because he goes from this point of, the president picked me, I wonder why, rah-ha, I'm going to go in like Rambo. Then he slowly starts to realize and humble himself, I'm a nobody. Why am I here? And he's like, this shit is actually fucked up. And you're right, he tells his men, nobody can repeat this once we get out of here, but I'm defying orders. Like, I'm going to order you guys to stay alive and get out of here and not to find David Chisholm. So he's kind of a bold guy to defy orders, but still trust his men and like read in his men on the situation and be real with them, And that's the only thing that saves their life. Plus Mitch choosing to help him.
Right. And so Ward just shells out all the money, hires Scott and his boys. Mitch shows up after a brief stint in going to South Africa, where we see him be a family man for a little bit.
We got to talk about that.
What did you think about this? We'll I guess we'll bring it up again later because we get even more of it once he goes back. But he even you mentioned you have a quote for this, so can you bust that out?
Yeah. I mean, but long story short is Mitch goes in. They drop these caches of supplies, medical supplies, weaponry, and communications gear. They're calling out the telephone number using these hidden codes. Each cache has a riddle tied to it that only David Chisholm would be able to find the coordinates.
This coordinate is the 7th number of your social security number. Like that. Yeah. That was cool. Like I really liked that.
Walk in the direction that you went to your favorite lunch spot. In whatever city you worked in. Go 20 paces. Yeah. That was a Kyleism. Remember we talked about these riddles?
He didn't think that we had that, but I definitely have seen it before with him.
Yeah, he does those little riddles. He also likes another Kyleism we should look for. He told us he likes the quirky characters, and I feel like between this Matteo Ricci guy with the infected leg, Gideon Alma even quirky as can be in a life or death kind of way. He's giving us plenty of quirk here, and then this random Chinese scientist and researcher who ends up being a beast in the woods, living off the land.
Right.
I'm wondering if she's a secret plant in the David Chisholm research, and her true colors and skills as a spy came through in a matter of life or death, and she's really.
You think that's a long play? I don't know. It could be.
Is she a plant in mole? I just thought it was so weird when he's like, "Oh, she's not going to be much help in the jungle," and then she's the one who saves the day with these skills. I wonder if it's just.
I think it's more so just you never know somebody until you know somebody.
That's true. And she grew up in hardship and knew what it was like to work the farm. Yeah. But yeah, meanwhile, so that's how they get David Chisholm out, which pisses off the cooks. He's ordering Nash he's ordering Kennedy, call Mitch back. I don't care what you have to do. I do not want him there. I do not want Scott involved. And basically, Irene's like, I can tell them that, but they're private citizens. I have no control over them. They're not working for me in this capacity. And that pisses off Cook.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to mention about that whole scene where the Frank Mason,
Fred Mason, baby.
Fred is it Fred Mason or Frank? I don't know. Either way,
Fred
Mason.
Hero.
Some hero antics with the helicopter.
Oh yeah,
getting Mitch in, getting that. I'm like that brought me back to some Flynnian details of like inner workings of helicopters and having to go in and how you like have to get the a stretcher like in there. Yeah. I don't know. It was really really cool.
Yeah, they were on like a cliffside. So Fred Mason starts swaying a dangling Rapp with the stretcher in like a pendulum motion. And he eventually like slams him into this rock, but Rapp's able to release and land on this like cliff dwelling at this cave entrance. And eventually Rapp gets all three of them on the stretcher, and Fred Mason is able to make that badass move and pull out, but it leaves Rapp on the ground. Yeah, that was super cool. I did want to ask Kyle about how he came up with that idea.
And there's this right after that, Rapp quickly shaves so that way he can like blend in.
Right, and he rubs mud all over himself.
Yeah, rubs mud all over like a little bit of blackface. So he can blend in with this. I thought that was an interesting detail.
And it was interesting that they say with him operating less in the desert, getting a little older, his skin
He's lighter.
It was a lighter complexion. That's why he had to do that. Yeah.
And because Claudia hasn't put on SPF 70 all the time.
That's right.
That was so funny.
How Claudia says, like, all these bullets fighting all these crazy terrorists are not going to get you killed, but skin cancer will.
Right, exactly.
She's still bugging his ass. And I want to get to, you're right, I want to wrap this part up with Mitch as the family man, because that's a huge part of what Kyle's doing in this book. Perhaps one of the biggest transformations for Mitch in this book is his personal life. But one last thing as they're escaping the jungle is that Mitch and Scott save the day on the ground where they find... So Chisholm's already gone, and Mitch decides, out of the goodness of his heart, he'll try to save the American soldiers, but also because he wants to know more about where their orders came from.
Right. Yeah.
So he does want to save them for a little bit of self-interest and getting info on who the hell they are and what they're doing. But did you like that scene where Mitch is in the front, Scott's in the back, and they both have the infrared strobes, and they get the whole line of soldiers to stay between them? That way the gunship can see their infrared strobes and just light up everything else around them. And they're just walking through the jungle, and literally 360 degrees around them within just a few feet is being blown to smithereens. But with these infrared lights, they're perfectly fine not getting hit. I thought that was just nasty.
That was really cool. We didn't touch on it, but like the earlier chapter where Mitch and like the Occam's grenade, stun grenade that eventually gets brought up later, and the sniper drone that can turn any average person, any average shooter into a Charlie Wicker. There's some pretty cool tech that Kyle weaves into it. I guess we touched on it. If people want to listen to more on that stuff, we talked about it with Kyle's gun guy, Rod Gregg, last week. So go listen to that pod. But yeah, there's some pretty cool tech in this book.
Yeah, and what a great opening scene, too, because it's just Scott and the boys joking around, trying out this new tech and just cracking laughs. So I like that the first rap scene in the book is a humorous one. I feel like that was refreshing.
And they all ride the lightning together.
That's right. Rapp pushes the button. Don't push the red button. He pushes the red button.
That was funny.
So, I mean, we open with Rapp joking around with the guys at the DARPA facility. But then, after this action sequence on the ground in Africa, he's again a new person.
To get back home. Yeah.
He's got to get back home. And the whole time he's thinking, I could just be in South Africa with Claudia. And not just Claudia, but with Anna. And the things Kyle does here, I just think are brilliant, because I want, as much as we love the Mitch kicking ass and taking names, can Mitch Rapp deal with a child? Because Claudia's out and Rapp has to drive her home. And on the car ride home with Anna, she's talking about her new friend Amale that she's friends with in South Africa, and her Rapp has the idea to pick her up so she can come over for a sleepover. And I'm like, what? Here it is. So Claudia asks, would it be possible for you to pick up Anna's friend Amale and drop her off at home? Rapp was about to give her a simple yes, but he was suddenly invaded by some kind of evil domestic spirit. Why don't we just keep her for a day or two? Anna would love it, and it would take the pressure off of her mother. Claudia was silent for long enough that Rapp thought he might have inadvertently disconnected her. Finally, she spoke. Are you serious? I was thinking that, but didn't want to suggest it. 2 girls are 4 times as much work as just one. I crawled through the jungle being hunted by an African death cult. How bad could it be? Oh, much worse than that.
It's so out of character for Mitch to do this because you got to think about it, right? Mitch had a daughter, or no,
unborn daughter.
Was going to have a daughter, and now he had to skip. How old is Anna when she's brought back in Survivor? 7? 6 or 7, I want to say.
I think, yeah.
So he's had to, shift to now dealing with it. I don't know how old she is now, but yeah, it's funny because I feel like Anna has aged, but Mitch hasn't aged.
Right. And
Kyle even said that, right?
Right.
You're gonna have Anna going to college, but Mitch is still the same age.
Right. Yo, listen to this one. This is later on, probably where we'll pick up in part 2 with Mitch and Maz and Scott protecting the Ward compound in Uganda. So Rapp is definitely, on the mission, right? He's on the op. He's planning the mission. But he takes a phone call from Anna because Claudia is homesick. And Anna on the phone is complaining that she wants to ride her bike. But Claudia says, you can't ride your bike. And she calls Mitch and he answers while he's planning this op. And he says, if your mom says to stay off the bike, then stay off it. And you should be helping out around the house. Was he really doing this? Was he really standing in the middle of nowhere, Uganda, surrounded by mercenaries, lecturing a 7-year-old about personal hygiene? The family man crap was starting to get out of hand.
He even knows it can't go on much longer like this.
No, but he loves it too.
He's trying.
Because
he's trying.
He wants to ride his bike. He wants to ride with Anna. I mean, he wants to train for that. Like, you could tell he doesn't want to train to be better on missions like this. He wants to train and get physically fit so he can go cycling in South Africa. Like,
right.
His life goals have shifted.
You could see something like you've seen The Professional, right?
Mm-mm.
Or Leon, like the movie with Natalie Portman as a really young. I don't know if she's the daughter or like just a.
No.
So it's the French guy who's been he was in Mission Impossible. I'm really bad with his name. Anyways, look up The Professional.
Okay.
It's a movie. He's a sniper assassin. And he trains Natalie Portman. Natalie Portman's like super young. Highly good movie. Anyways, I bring that up because you could see like Mitch maybe training Anna, not like, but subtly, not blatantly like trying to make her into an assassin, but like subtly doing stuff, to obviously getting her stamina up, getting her bike, maybe teaching her how to shoot for hunting purposes, stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
That would be funny to see. I could see him switching more to that. I know, she's got dogs.
She's got the dogs on her side.
To deal with the dogs.
So she understands some protection, and training them. Yeah.
So,
but the evil domestic spirit is definitely creeping into Rapp's psyche.
Creeping in. That's funny. Well, one last thing I wanted to bring up, right? So we are stopping essentially right around chapter 20. In chapter 18, we find out Mike heads to the White House. He gives the report that Mitch has saved I don't know, this is like a third to the book, not even.
Mm-hmm.
And we essentially find out that the cooks are bad. Like, right away.
Yeah.
That leads me more credence to my idea that the stuff that got cut was supposed to be the beginning. Because I feel like this chapter was always there. And to find out that they're bad, like I felt that we found out their motives really quickly. And I again, that just thinking it through on the fly makes me feel like we weren't supposed to see this right now. We were supposed to see this sort of either halfway through or 2/3 through. So anyways, I saw that when we were about to cut here.
Yeah. So I guess that's the point where the cooks are considering using Mike now that they know Mitch successfully foiled their plans of having Chisholm dead and possibly Ward captured too. That's what the Saudis wanted. That's what the cooks wanted. Now that that's foiled, you kind of get inside the cook's mind of, we need somebody on the inside. Irene was no help. Irene had a chance to prove she's loyal to the Cooks by actually pulling Mitch out, because the Cooks are no dummies. When Irene says, I can't control Mitch and Scott,
I don't know where he is. I can't. He won't answer my phone calls.
I'll leave him a voicemail and tell him to come home. The Cooks are no dummies. That signals they're done with Irene right there. Right.
Sure.
They're done. So I think this is where we're kind of cut scene to now. They're going to want someone on the inside. We already heard Nash giving his rundown of them and their worldview. We already know he's Mr. Goody Two-Shoe America. He might not see that side of the Cooks, but at one point he even says, and this comes much later, but he says, fuck it. If the American president wanted a file, I don't care what the file's about. I don't care how they're using it or who they're giving it to. I am a deputy director of the CIA. They want a file? I give them a file.
I think that's also, all right, anyway, that's him justifying to himself. That is him justifying to himself.
I think it is. Yeah, okay.
Once we got a lot to get to. I know, we have a lot to get to. This is going to be we've just gone for an hour and 20 minutes, and we're only a third through the book, guys. This book has a lot.
It has a lot. And it's a short
But it's going to speed up. It's going to speed up.
So I think where we pick up is David Chisholm and Ward are saved. Well, David Chisholm is saved. We know Rapp and Scott are on the ground in Africa in cahoots with Ward. We know the Cooks are pissed off about that and they feel threatened. They know Irene cannot help them. And we know Claudia and Anna are back home in South Africa and Mitch is kind of longing to be with them. And, geez, I cannot believe how much we still have to talk about in this book. Things are about to heat up.
All right, so next time we will be finishing up the book, giving our final ratings. We said it at the top. I'll say it again. We need to thank our patrons, Special Operator Sherry F., our special agents George, Matt, Don, Dennis, Peggy, Catherine, Ray, Bridget, Jeff, and Mark. Please subscribe, rate, and review using your favorite podcasting platform, or find us at MitchRappPod.com or on Twitter and Instagram at MitchRappPod. And as always, just let Mitch be Mitch. Just a disclaimer, this podcast is not affiliated with Vince Flynn, Kyle Mills, or Simon & Schuster, but thank you to them for bringing us the wonderful world of rap. And the music soundtrack is Guerrilla Tactics by Raphael Crooks.